Dubbed as America's first female serial killer, Wuornos' story is a chilling tale of murder, manipulation, and madness. Between 1989 and 1990, she brutally murdered 7 men along Florida highways. Convicted of her heinous crimes, Wuornos was executed by lethal injection in 2002, leaving behind a legacy of terror. Wuornos didn't fit the typical profile of a serial killer. She was a prostitute who claimed to kill in self-defense. Yet, the sheer brutality of her crimes painted a different picture. Her victims were shot at close range, their bodies discarded without a second thought. The media portrayed her as a monster, devoid of empathy or conscience. But behind the headlines was a story of a life marred by abuse, neglect, and survival. To understand Aileen Wuornos is to delve into the darkest corners of human nature. Aileen Wuornos was born on February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan. Abandoned by her mother at 6 months old, she and her brother were left in the care of abusive grandparents. By the age of 11, Wuornos was trading sexual favors for cigarettes and food. The abuse she endured at home was brutal, both physical and sexual in nature. At 14, Wuornos became pregnant after being raped by a family friend. She was sent to a home for unwed mothers, where she gave birth to a baby boy who was immediately put up for adoption. Shortly after returning home, she dropped out of school and was kicked out by her grandfather. Homeless and alone, Wuornos turned to prostitution, marking the beginning of her descent into a life of crime. Her childhood was a series of traumatic events that shaped her into the person she would become. The abuse, abandonment, and constant struggle for survival instilled in her a deep-seated mistrust and anger towards the world. These early experiences provided a grim context for understanding the origins of her violent behavior. Wuornos' early adulthood continued the pattern of instability and crime. By the age of 20, she had been arrested multiple times for charges ranging from disorderly conduct to armed robbery. In 1976, Wuornos hitchhiked to Florida, where she met and married a wealthy yacht club president. The marriage was short-lived. Wuornos' violent outbursts led to a quick annulment. During the 1980s, Wuornos' criminal activities escalated. She was arrested for armed robbery in 1981 and served a year in prison. Her release did little to deter her from returning to violent crime. She continued to engage in theft, forgery, and other illegal activities, all while maintaining her primary source of income, prostitution. Her encounters with clients were increasingly marked by violence and aggression, foreshadowing the murderous path she would soon take. Wuornos' early crimes were symptoms of a deeper, more pervasive issue. In 1986, Wuornos' life took a significant turn when she met Tyria Moore, a hotel maid in a Daytona Beach gay bar. The two quickly formed a close bond, and Moore became Wuornos' lover and confidant. This relationship provided Wuornos with a sense of stability and companionship she had long craved. However, it also marked the beginning of her most violent phase. With Moore by her side, Wuornos felt emboldened to escalate her criminal activities. They drifted across Florida, living off the money Wuornos made from prostitution and theft. Moore was aware of Wuornos' criminal activities but seemed to ignore the warning signs. Wuornos' first known murder occurred in November 1989 when she shot and killed Richard Malley. She claimed that Malley had tried to rape her, and she acted in self-defense. Moore's presence added more complexity to Wuornos' actions. Together, they navigated a path of destruction that would ultimately lead to their downfall. Section 5. The Modus Operandi. Wuornos' Killing Spree. Wuornos' killing spree spanned just over a year, from late 1989 to late 1990. Her modus operandi was chillingly consistent. She would solicit male drivers along Florida highways, posing as a hitchhiker or a prostitute. After gaining their trust, she would lure them to a secluded area, shoot them multiple times at close range, and rob them. The bodies were often left where they fell, stripped of their valuables and dignity. Most were middle-aged men, often traveling alone. Wuornos targeted those who were unlikely to be missed immediately, ensuring she had time to escape and dispose of any evidence. Despite her claims of self-defense, the nature of the killings suggested a premeditated pattern rather than spontaneous acts of survival. Wuornos used a .22 caliber revolver, ensuring a quick death. After killing her victims, Wuornos would take their money, credit cards, and personal belongings. Wuornos was not just a killer, she was a predator, operating with a level of detachment attachment that made her even more dangerous. Section 6. Claims of self-defense, the victim's stories. Throughout her trial and subsequent media interviews, Wuornos steadfastly maintained that her actions were in self-defense. She claimed that each of her victims had either tried to assault her or posed an imminent threat to her life. Richard Mallory, her first known victim, was portrayed by Wuornos as a violent rapist. While Mallory had a criminal record, the manner of his death suggested premeditation rather than a spontaneous act of defense. This pattern repeated itself with her subsequent victims, each time raising questions about her version of events. The forensic evidence indicated that these men were shot without warning, and their bodies were left in positions that suggested they were caught off guard. The inconsistencies in her stories cast doubt on her claims of self-defense. Wuornos' narrative of self-defense crumbled beneath the evidence, revealing a darker, more sinister motivation behind her crimes. Section 7. The Trial, Cold-Blooded and Unflinching. The trial of Aileen Wuornos was a media spectacle, drawing attention from across the nation. Held in 1992, it was marked by its dramatic proceedings and the cold-blooded demeanor of her fate. Wuornos faced multiple charges of first-degree murder, with the prosecution seeking the death penalty. Wuornos' behavior during the trial was erratic and unsettling. At times, she appeared calm and composed, while at other moments, she erupted in fits of anger and paranoia. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against Wuornos, including forensic analysis, witness testimonies, and her own confessions. Each piece of evidence chipped away at her self-defense narrative, exposing the premeditated nature of her crimes. After a 12-day trial, the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder. Wuornos was sentenced to death, her fate sealed by the very system she had defied for so long. The trial was a real testament to the depth of her crimes and the cold-blooded nature of her actions. Section 8. The Insanity Plea, a Desperate Measure. As the trial progressed, Wuornos' defense team attempted to leverage her mental state as a mitigating factor. They argued that years of abuse and trauma had left her with severe psychological issues, rendering her incapable of distinguishing right from wrong. Psychiatrists and mental health experts were brought in to evaluate Wuornos. She was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. However, the prosecution countered that these diagnoses did not absolve her of responsibility for her actions. Wuornos' own statements during the trial and in interviews further complicated the insanity plea. The jury, already swayed by the overwhelming evidence of her guilt, was not convinced that her mental state excused her actions. The insanity plea was ultimately rejected, sealing her fate. The plea's failure underscored the gravity of her crimes and the cold-blooded nature of her actions. Section 9. The Final Judgment, Execution and Aftermath. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison. Her final moments were marked by a defiant calmness. She refused a last meal, opting instead for a simple cup of coffee. In her final statement, Wuornos expressed a mix of resignation and defiance, claiming that her spirit would be coming back and promising retribution from beyond the grave. The execution brought a sense of closure to the families of her victims, who had waited years for justice. However, Wuornos' death also left lingering questions about the nature of justice and the death penalty. Her case sparked debates about the treatment of mentally ill individuals within the criminal justice system and the ethics of capital punishment. Wuornos' legacy is a grim testament to the depths of human depravity and the consequences of a society that fails its most vulnerable members. Section 10. Conclusion. The Legacy of Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos' life and crimes leave an indelible mark on the collective memory of American society. Her story is one of extreme violence, but it is also a reflection of the systemic failures that contributed to her tragic trajectory. From a childhood marred by abuse and abandonment to a life of crime and, ultimately, a killing spree that shocked the nation, Wuornos' journey was a descent into darkness. Her actions were a desperate cry for control in a world that had shown her nothing but cruelty. Wuornos' case highlighted critical issues within the criminal justice system, particularly the handling of individuals with severe mental health issues. It also underscored the need for better support systems for those who have experienced abuse and trauma. While Wuornos' actions were inexcusable, they serve as a grim reminder of the the consequences of neglect and the importance of early intervention and support. Wuornos' legacy is a complex and multifaceted one. Her story continues to evoke